Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Steven Hour. We are back here with another top 10 video, and today we'll be doing my top 10 favorite Spider-Man villains of all time. Now, Spider-Man is up there with Batman with having some of the best, with the best rogues gallery of all time. And that's it. Let's just get into it. Spider-Man is just so full of great villains. Now remember, these are my top 10 personal favorite. This is personal preference. It's purely subjective. And if you disagree, then leave your name out in the comments. But before we get into the top 10, I want to get into an honorable mention, as I really like this character, but he's not really in the top 10, and I'll explain my reasonings why. Now, now, this character, honorable mention, is given to Wilson Fisk, alias the Kingpin, one of the most iconic Marvel gangsters in the Rogues Gallery. Now, why am I giving him an honorable mention? Well, first off, I'm not going to deny that he is a great character, but there is a reason why I'm giving him an honorable mention, or why I'm giving him a shout out. Because not only is he not just a good character, but he's kind of not really a Spider-Man villain. Now, like I said, he is technically a Spider-Man villain, as he did originally appear in the Spider-Man comics back in the early debut in the 60s, I believe. But here's the thing, the Kingpin has in recent years, or I believe since the 80s, has been more identified as a Daredevil villain. And for many people, he is a Daredevil villain. He is Daredevil's arch nemesis, despite the fact him actually being originally introduced as a Spider-Man villain. You see, the Kingpin and certain characters in the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery do appear in other superhero Rogues Galleries. Like, Kingpin's gone up against Spider-Man, Daredevil, and the Punisher. Now, I absolutely love this character, and he has, of course, been adapted into many forms of media. He was in the Spider-Man 90s TV show, and was a main antagonist, and of course there was a this special episode where Spider-Man teams up with Daredevil, who appears in the show. And of course he has appeared in the Daredevil live action movie and the Daredevil Netflix series. Played absolutely perfect portrayal in the Netflix show, a bit more creative side, but absolutely love that. So the reason why he's an honorable mention, because he's not really a Spider-Man villain anymore. He's more identified as Daredevil's main arch nemesis. So despite the fact the character will always pair up and go up against the web crawler. Now, as a result, that's why he's an honorable mention. Not that he's a terrible character, it's because these days he's more identified as a Daredevil villain. So that's why he's my honorable mention. Now, with that out of the way, let's get into the top 10. Now, coming in at number 10, the Shocker. Real name, Herman Schultz. Now, Herman Schultz, the Shocker, is basically your henchman villain with a gimmick. And that's all he is. I love the costume design, and I like how he's sort of considered or treated by some as like a loser villain. Though I don't see him as that. I just see him as a hood, a thug with a special gimmick suit, and then you can argue that's for the majority of Spider-Man's rogues gallery. But at least for some that stick, this one doesn't. And even in video games, he's always like the first boss battle people go up against, usually in a video game. And that's all he is. He's a thug with a gimmick, and that's okay just to have a character that's like that. Now, he doesn't get any character development at all, not really, in many forms of media. But just because you don't have that doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad character. He's at number 10 because I just have always loved the character, especially the costume design has always been eye-striking to me. Eye-striking. And that's it. That's all to say about this character. The design itself is just so great. That's all I can say. And he's at number 10. Coming in at number 9, Mr. Negative. Now, Mr. Negative is very new to the Marvel Comics and very new member of the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery. Now, when you introduce a new villain to a beloved superhero Rogues Gallery, rarely do some either make an impact or make a huge name for themselves. Mr. Negative is just one of those villains that, even though he's introduced fairly late, especially for 2000s, he still has managed to make a name for himself. And for me, this is truly like and he's just truly great. First off, just look at that design. It's so catchy. Mr. Negative, real name, Mr. Lee. At least that's what I think. I'll explain later. But basically, Mr. Negative is a gang is a gang leader with these mystical powers, and he leads a organized group called the Demons. Basically, these guys are dressed in business suits and they wear these like demon masks. He's a bit of like the Asian culture, which is always good to have a bit of diversity with not just villains but characters in general, to not be, just average Americans, but just get a bit of a diversity. And I just love the design. The name sounds very catchy, and it fits the design. He's very new, and he's another gangster character. That's why I like him. But I also gotta like his portrayal that they did in the Marvel Spider-Man video game that came out like 2 years ago. That is probably the main reason why he's on the list. And I've always loved the design. He's very new. I just absolutely love the name Mr. Negative. It fits as in a photo negative. So that's really how he got the name. Now, his name's not really Mr. Lee, and that's the thing, is because in the comics version, the character's backstory is still a bit of a mystery. Not fully explored, but a bit of mystery there, and that's what I like it. I like a little bit. True, they might have maybe opened it up in more recent years, but for me, the character is a little bit of a mystery, and that's how I want this character to be. A little bit of mystery. You can explain a little bit, or tease here and there, but still remain mid in history. The reason why he's at number 9 and not above, if I really like this character and design, is because A, others are just more iconic, and B, he's recently new, and others are just, stuck a bit better. Now, coming in at number 8, Tombstone. Real name, Lonnie Lincoln. Tombstone is one of those villains that has a connection to not Spider-Man, but a member of the supporting cast in the Spider-Man comics, and it is Robbie Robertson, a beloved recurring character, and I just like that they try to get the side character time to flesh out, but at the same time, we are given a very unique villain. First off, Lonnie Lincoln is an albino. Now, an albino is your. Now, if I'm politically correct, now correct me if I'm wrong, but an albino is basically you're black but white. Like you have like a skin disorder, and it's quite rare to get those. To be one of those people. But anyway, back to the story. So Tombstone grew up with Robert Lincoln, went to the same school, and he was bullied in his kid years. And because even though he was black, he couldn't be really fully a part of that black community because of his white skin. Now, because of that, he eventually became not just a bully himself, but a bit of a monster, and immediately went down a dark path. And the person he loved to pick on was Robbie. Eventually, he and Robbie sort of have, again, they have a lot of history, not just from school, but even when Robbie started being a reporter, he ran into Tombstone, and he basically threatened him. And to this day, Tombstone and Robbie just have, well, for a while, Tombstone and Robbie were just like these interesting characters. Like, Tombstone rose through the ranks in the underworld to become a top hitman, and Robbie became this huge reporter. There's this huge arc with these characters in comic books, and yeah. So originally, if he didn't look threatening enough, it wasn't until later where he gets like powers to be super strong, and he eventually goes from a hitman to a mob boss. I like how they made the character not just connected to Robbie. He has a great visual design, and he's another gangster character. One day I will be doing my top 10 comic book gangster characters one day. But also I just like the idea that, a little bit of prejudice even amongst his arguably own kind, which is something I think it's the first time ever dealt in comics. And I also like, as soon as he gets these powers, despite the fact he intimidates Robbie, in a weird, sick way, he considers him a friend, and when he gets these powers, and it's partly because of Robbie, he calls it quits with him. And, and he just, calls it quits, and yeah, so he's been a Spider-Man villain for years. Even though he has, of course, appeared in, again, he's one of these characters that, despite that, he does appear against other comic book characters. Luke Cage, Punisher, Daredevil, you name it, he's done that, but he will always be more associated with Spider-Man. Unlike Kingpin, who is now more associated with Daredevil than Spider-Man, Tombstone has always been a Spider-Man character. And That's who he is. Now, he's appeared in cartoons, of course. Uh, but I think the best portrayal, the best version of him was in Spectacular Spider-Man, where he's basically this #1 crime lord. I like how they just give him a bit more like he's treated far better than the sort of B-lister, and how to see more threat and power in that. In the Spider-Man video game, he is treated. Yeah, no, he's got a new design to be more of the head of a biker gang. I actually like that design far better. And for comics, I want them to adapt that instead of this more gangster tuxedo, which is a good look, don't get me wrong, but I think him being a biker, it just suits the character far better. Coming in at number 7, the Vulture. Spider-Man's first one of the second villain Spider-Man ever went up against. Now, and he's just an all-time great. He's always reappearing, not just in comics, but he's appeared in other media too. Lots of cartoons, but of course he appeared as the main villain in Spider-Man: Homecoming, and where he is portrayed by Michael Keaton, who of course I happen to know for 1989's Batman as, well, Batman. So just a bit of a fun thing for me there. First of all, Tombstone. Oh wait, sorry, correction. The Vulture, real name Adrian Toomes. He's an old man who invented the ability to fly. You think now, but eventually we find out his origin. He was part of this business, but then his partner steals his not just control of the company, but control of the company, leaves him with barely anything. Eventually, after that, he goes on a crime. Eventually, after that, he sort of became a criminal lost everything. Originally wanted to become a vigilante, not vigilante, but he just wants like to get revenge, find evidence that that was his habit. When he couldn't find it, he went solely for revenge. So he kind of feels sad for the character, but he's also become just this villain. First off, the fact that he can fly, I find that to be a very cool villain. Like the fact he can fly, and he's an old man, but despite his age, he is very good in a fight, and he can fly and all that. And I like how it's just like a nice contrast with Spider-Man, who's basically a teenager kid. So I do kind of like that, and I also like that, that he's this old man. He's had a lot of great stories written about him, like like he develops cancer. Like again, he's old, so and that does something that even you would eventually experience, maybe at old age, maybe not. And of course, there's been other people to take the name the Vulture, but Adrian Toomes is the best version, and will always be the definitive version. Again, he's also appeared in a bunch of video games, but again, Vulture is such a great character, and for me, I just like that he's this old man that can fly that goes up against a kid. So it's basically like like a man with experience going up against a rookie. How would that play out? It's not the skills that matter, it's the experience, but also maybe ideology, which I like what this character represents. Again, sometimes certain characters can be interpreted far differently. But overall, I just like the overall design of the character. And for me, the most sympathetic version of the character will always be from Homecoming, which they managed to redefine the character, remake him to make him this character what he is. I just absolutely love the Vulture. He's absolutely great. He's an all-time greatest villain. Number 6, the Rhino. Have a thug in a costume, just like Shocker. But unlike Shocker, Rhino is dumb. He's not bright or intelligent. He's very dumb. Alex O'Hearn was a mob enforcer until eventually one day he agreed to do this experiment to become this guy, the Rhino. And basically he's a thug with powers. But Vulture, have in recent years been more heavily associated as members of the Sinister Six. He's all brawn, no brain. He's a bit of a comic relief in most forms of media, what they do. I just like that's how the guy's done. Now, because all cartoons mostly do this. He's a thug with no brain, he's comedic effect, and he's really strong. That is Rhino. And that's how the character should always be portrayed. Don't try and make him intelligent. Just make him a dumb thug with this suit with great comedic timing. That's how I've always viewed this character. Also like how he's always charging at Spider-Man, and Spider-Man always has to think of a way to take him down. Use a bit of brain to take him down, because he's not that bright. So that proves just how smart Spider-Man is. Now, the best version in animation of this character will again be Spectacular Spider-Man. That for me is always going to be the definitive way to describe that character. And yeah, Rhino's always been just one of the most. He's been a very beloved member of the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery for years, and of course, he's also been in video games. He's also made his debut in live action in The Amazing Spider-Man 2. Now, I will say this: despite what people think about that movie, I honestly think Electro, portrayed by Jamie Foxx, was really well done, and also like how they did with Rhino. I mean, come on, at the end, when he finally becomes Rhino, he's a thug with a suit. That's Rhino. He's a thug with a suit. Despite the fact that you can say the animation or the suit isn't great, I can't deny the portrayal was right. And for me, it just made sense just to do it like that. So yeah, I'm gonna be one of those defenders thinking that Rhino was done well in that movie. Maybe he didn't get enough screen time like he should have had, but the character certainly, in my opinion, was done justice. He should have got more screen time, maybe a better suit. Yeah, it was done justice. I thought that Electro was also done well. Green Goblin in that movie, not so great. But yeah, you get my idea. For me, Rhino is just a classic villain, and I like he's a thug with a very powerful suit and great comedic potential. A lot, and it's always fun to see in any forms of media. Number 5, Mysterio. Now, Quentin Beck was a stunt performer and special effects artist in the movie business way back in the glory days before the CGI, made everything way too easy. But he always wanted to become a director and a movie star, but he didn't have the looks. In fact, if you actually look, especially in a cartoon, he does have a sort of Spock appearance, which makes a bit of sense. Because, not very attractive looking to be a very huge quality movie star. As a result, but because of his talent, he wanted to become a hero. The problem was Spider-Man was already a hero, so he came up with this plan, courtesy of the Daily Bugle, Jonah Jameson, always poking that Spider-Man's really a villain, and not a, is more of a villain than hero, which I've always found to always be a royal pain, because it's obvious he's a hero, but it's obvious that he doesn't care. He just uses him as a villain, as a better way to make, papers. Which, again, is on him, but we get to Jameson maybe in another video in the future. Anyway, but realizing that, he creates the costume Mysterio and basically develops a plan to frame Spider-Man and make himself look like a hero and Spider-Man a villain to become a hero and beloved by New York. Now, automatically, that is a great villain plan. Hands down. Of course, Spider-Man manages to defeat him, knocks him away, and he swears a vendetta against Spider-Man, for ruining his chance to finally be in the limelight. What you've got to understand about this character is that Quentin is just a man who just wants to be beloved, who wants to be in the limelight, but he never could because, I don't know, there's always something that's always upstaging him, and he always views Spider-Man because as this person who's always going to take the limelight. He's also a little bit jealous because, although, Mysterio has gotten magic abilities over the years, Mysterio is always a man who uses illusions and tricks of the trade to always best Spider-Man. That's how the character's always been. So, and the fact he has to use these trickeries compared to Spider-Man, who always has these abilities, does make the character very interesting. And let's not kid ourselves. He has a great visual design out of all the characters. Perhaps of all the Spider-Man villains, that visual design is just fantastic. Another thing I also like is, most recently he's finally made his debut in live action, Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, I love the actor. I love the characters, how he was brought, how he was done. I would have liked but I just felt something was really missing there. I'm not saying the character was terrible, but I just felt something was missing. And the character was absolutely fantastic. I do like how with these Spider-Man movies, they are using villains that haven't been used yet. Which I think that they should do, especially with Batman villains. Use villains that are still yet to be used, or at least done right. That's how they should always do with these characters. But they don't. Overall, Mysterio is just a really great villain, and I do like he's finally received some attention. He is one of those villains that no matter what, he just doesn't receive any attention at all. But now he is, and I just like the overall character, just how he's written, the backstory, and overall the jealousy with Spider-Man. Always great to see. Number 4, the Sandman. Real name Flint Marko. Sandman, well, Flint Marko was a common hood who, after one incident, stumbling into a research lab, he gets turned into these molecules, and it looks like sand. With these abilities, he now realizes he has the ability to finally get all the money he ever wanted. Spider-Man, like Mysterio, is another villain that has appeared way early back in the comics. Back in Spider-Man's glory years, which was basically the 60s, the glory days where he first appeared. Overall, the idea of fighting Sand and really have to really think outside the box to really defeat him, for me, is another great villain idea. And another case where a thug gets powers. But I do like in more recent years, they developed the character to be a bit more sympathetic. Again, he's a thug. He's a hood, but he's not a killer. Not really. He just always wants is the big score, and he is shown to be a very sympathetic character. And that's what I've liked what they've done in cartoons. Like in Spectacular Spider-Man, what they did with that Sandman. They showed that he does have a heart. He's not a murderer. He's just in it for the money, and he does have a heart. And also like what was done in Spider-Man 3. Now, despite Spider-Man 3 not being so great, in my opinion, they did not do Venom right. Or at least they could have done Venom far better than the source material. Harry Osborn, the Goblin costume I like, but I just felt is not the Goblin at all. Now, despite the character called the New Goblin, it just doesn't work for me. And another thing also I want to point out is that out of that mess of a movie, I cannot deny that Sandman was done absolutely well in that movie. And from what I've been told, Sam Raimi really wanted to use the Sandman out of all the villains. He was really keen on using the Sandman. You can tell so much writing was done with that character. And for me, out of Sandman, the comics version, especially with the more sympathetic years later version, and in Spider-Man 3 are perhaps the best interpretations of the character. Also, like he's also another member of the Sinister Six, the team where 6 of Spider-Man's greatest foes come together to take Spider-Man down, and is considered the best super villain team in history. And honestly, the Sinister Six and Sandman is just a great character. First off, the design is just basic, just that striped shirt and short like brown pants. The design is just simple, but it works. And I don't know what is so catchy about it. It's just normal clothing compared to other supervillains on the list that either have a fancy suit or an interesting like costume. He just dressed normally, and that's what I like about it. And number 4 is the Sandman. Number 3, here's one of my favorites, Hammerhead. Now, for quite a while, Hammerhead was my number 1 favorite villain. But after 2 years ago, I've changed my mind. But I've always had a soft spot for this character, Hammerhead. Name really unknown. Although comics have kind of revealed the name, it still remains a mystery. Hammerhead is basically, a love to the Dick Tracy gangsters, but also at the same time a love to the old school gangsters of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. Basically, although his real name is unknown, we do have a bit to his origin. Hammerhead is basically a member of the Mafia, Marvel's version of the Mafia. And after suffering an incident outside in an alleyway where his head was badly bashed, he was then saved by a doctor who came by and fixed his head, gave him an adamantium skull. Now, when that happened, he lost most of his memory, but the only thing he could remember was an old movie poster called The Scarface Mob, basically about the old 20s gangsters. When that happened, he was reborn as Hammerhead. Other than the fact the head being, hit people, he also dresses and talks like, the gangster from the, 20s and 30s time period. And of course, he wields a atomic gun. Again, is perhaps my favorite gangster character, mobster character in all of comics. And I just like how he just embodies organized crime of a previous decade. he's perhaps one of the most underrated characters. And honestly, with all like those Marvel Netflix shows, I am shocked he hasn't been adapted. Again, Hammerhead is one of those characters that, although he is heavily and will always remain a Spider-Man villain, he has been able to be, cause trouble with other heroes, but he will always be a mainstay to the Spider-Man Rogues Gallery, unlike Kingpin, who can, who started off as a Spider-Man villain, but is now more than ever a Daredevil villain. Hammerhead is the opposite. He will always be a Spider-Man villain, and I feel that he's just a far better character for Spider-Man to go up against. Now, he's appeared in comics, and he's also appeared in many cartoons, with Spectacular Spider-Man being the best example. Again, for many of the villains, the best version is always in Spectacular Spider-Man, voiced by Joe DiMaggio. I think that's his name. In other words, the guy that voices Jake the Dog from Adventure Time. And of course, he has, of course, appeared in many Spider-Man cartoons. And of course, in Spider-Man video games, such as Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions, which I feel is perhaps one of the best versions of the character to appear in that as a boss in the game. But he also appears in the DLC to Marvel Spider-Man. And I do like how that character was done, but at the same time, not really. It was a mixed bag for me. It's done well, but not quite, because I didn't like what they did in the third arc of the story with the whole robot head. That's more of a Silvermane thing, but not a Hammerhead. But I did like how he was done and the whole look of the character. It was a bit modernized, but still stayed true to the roots of the character, I felt. Overall, this is a character I've always loved, and I really wish that he could get a live-action treatment, mostly in TV shows. He's never going to really be in a movie, but I always wish that he could somehow be in just any TV show. Number 2, Dr. Octopus, Dr. Octavius, real name Doc Ock, the Master Planner, or Dr. Octopus. He's up there as one of Spider-Man's 2 favorite villains in all the Rogues Gallery, and it's often debated who is truly Spider-Man's arch nemesis, this guy or number 1. But overall, he's just a really great character. I like the backstory. He was this nerd bullied in school, he grew up with an abusive father, but he had this mother that always loved him. And when he became smart, he began to just explode and become a scientist in his own right. The character, he fell in love with this woman, but his mother absolutely denied it, didn't want her, felt that she should be, that no one is better for. It's just one of those cases where the mother will always find a flaw in whatever the son's dating and view them to be the perfect match. That no woman is better to be a part of their son's life than her. And of course, he was forced to break up. Not to break up, but was about to he was engaged, and everything went downhill. He was mad. He became gloomy. He earned the nickname Doc Ock way before he became a villain, because when he did his research at these tentacles that did experiments. Eventually, the character went down a dark path, and when he found out that his mother was dating someone, and he got furious. She could date whoever she wanted, but he could not find the one he loved. This resulted in an argument, and she died of a heart attack. Filled with guilt with what he did, eventually an accident led to these tentacles being stuck to him, and unable to rip off. And the character always felt, and eventually, after the explosion, the tentacles started manipulating him, and he became this master criminal known as Doc Ock. He's involved himself in gangland. He's done all types of experiments to prove he is the smartest being, ever. And of course, he has been the leader and an absolute founding, and will always be the leader of the Sinister Six. For me, the character is always viewed as that, a scientist who suffered an accident, and his mental state is always called into question. He's basically a mad scientist, but with a very unique gimmick and a very, very absolutely fantastic visual design. He is often there to be considered, in more recent years, Spider-Man's arch nemesis. For me, it's always going to be our number 1. But he's just so great. He's been in so many cartoons. Again, Spectacular Spider-Man being another great version. And of course, his appearance in Spider-Man 2, I found that to be the absolutely one of the best versions of the character. And I do like how the character was done in Marvel Spider-Man. In many ways, Spider-Man and Doc Ock share the same thing. They are both brilliantly gifted, both have brilliantly gifted minds and have fantastic abilities. But they both use it for very different reasons. And in many ways, Doc Ock can, in many ways, view Spider-Man as an equal, but he prefers to view him as a pest, because if he did view him as an equal, he'll admit that maybe someone is far smarter and superior than him, which of course he can never, ever admit. Overall, number 2 is Doc Ock, but he does lose out to one villain, who many have always considered to be Spider-Man, the Webhead's number 1 bad guy. Number 1, drumroll please, the Green Goblin. Was there ever any doubt? Taking the top spot is, of course, Spider-Man's number 1 charge nemesis. Now, there has been many people to take on the Green Goblin mantle, but only one really is the one, like the main version we all associate with this character, and that, of course, is Norman Osborn. Now, I like how Norman Osborn, like, the character was done in the, like, first off, his arch nemesis is a person Spider-Man knows. He is the father to one of his best friends. And in many ways, Norman has always liked Peter. He's always viewed him as a son, as not just a son, but in many instances, the son he wished he had. I mean, it's not like he hates Harry, but I don't know. There's always something special about, Peter that was just never there with Harry. And speaking of Harry, he would eventually become the Green Goblin too. And and also, Green Goblin has caused more damage to the Webhead than anyone else. First off, was the first villain in the Rogues Gallery to find out his true identity. So already, just automatically great start off right there. The character is also responsible for the death of a very iconic moment in the Spider-Man comics, and is considered the moment that officially finally killed the Silver Age and started the Bronze Age to many people in comics. The character is first off, just look at the design. The character is sort of Marvel's version of the Joker, but at the same time, it's more Halloween obsessed. So yeah, so I absolutely like it. And the fact that he's insane, and Norman is a scientist. He's created the costumes, he's created the gadgets, he's created the glider. Overall, I just liked the overall look of the character. No one can really tell you that this guy is not iconic. He's of course appeared in movies and cartoons and video games. He is just there. The look, the character driven, and the fact that he's related, that has a connection to Peter. I like when they do villains that have, that are similar to the hero. And he's completely insane, off his rocker. And I do like his plans are really just to take out Spider-Man and rule the New York underworld, become the head of all criminal activity. Now, the character is just great. He's absolutely fantastic, and I just like how the character is absolutely written. This is Spider-Man's arch nemesis, and my number 1. There you have it, all my top 10 favorite Spider-Man villains. Now, of course, I might have left out some iconic ones, or maybe just some underrated ones. Who do you think should have been on the list? Do you agree with my findings, or do you have your other opinions? Who's your favorite Spider-Man villain? Well, let me know in the comments, and next time in this series of top 10s, I will go back to another top 10 villains from a TV show. The TV show Gotham. We'll be doing the top 10 villains from that show. So until then, I'm Stephen Waters. This has been the Stephen Hour, and so long for now.